It's not often that I get computers from the 90s. Around here, it's pretty much all 2000s and maybe 2010 stuff that I find. And the few times that I do get stuff from the 90s, it's usually like, you know, a system that somebody built or like a shop built, you know, not like an OEM system. And while those are interesting, there is sort of an appeal to actually getting like a proper like OEM computer, you know, from a specific time period. So when I got asked if I wanted this Pentium computer along with matching keyboard and mouse, obviously there was no way I could say no to that. And especially because this computer is made by AT&T. Yes, like AT&T. I didn't even know AT&T made computers in the 90s. I thought that was like an 80s thing that they did, and, you know, they just kind of stopped in the 80s. But no, they were making computers into the mid-90s, and I just had no idea. I've never heard anyone really talk about these. And looking online, there doesn't really seem to be a ton of information about these later computers. Now, this computer in particular is the Globalyst 630, and I just haven't found a ton of info about these. In fact, I've searched on YouTube, and unless I'm just not finding it, it's probably in a video somewhere on YouTube, like buried, and it's not like the main focus of the video or something like that. But I can't find a video that has a Globalyst 630 in it. So this might actually be one of the first videos on YouTube, if not the first, to actually feature one of these computers, which is pretty neat. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna, you know, test this, we're gonna inspect it. Hopefully everything works. If it doesn't work, I guess we'll have to fix it. The end goal is to, you know, fix everything and kind of restore it. You know, definitely a lot of this stuff is extremely dirty and definitely needs some restoration work, like just now noticing the mouse cable has some damage to it. So originally I was going to have this like history segment where I was going to go over the background of AT&T's computer operations and whatnot. I decided to cut that out because I didn't really think it was that good. It was mostly just me reading off the Wikipedia article, and it's not even that good of a Wikipedia article. It has like 2 references, so yeah, I wouldn't put a ton of faith into that being super accurate, so I just decided to cut it out. So you may occasionally hear reference to the history segment in the video because I had it planned out in my head before I actually started recording anything, so that's nice. The main thing you need to know from the history segment is that it seems like AT&T stopped producing computers around 1995, probably late 95, because it seems like they split off the computer division in kind of the end of 1995. If you're wondering why in the video I have a lot of focus on when the computer was being built and like the date codes on everything, that's the reason why. I was trying to figure out how late the system was built and, you know, how close to the end it was for AT&T building computers. So that's kind of why. Sorry if this seems kind of janky. This whole video was not super well planned out. I was just really excited to mess around with this computer. So I figure that this computer is probably from maybe late 1994 or 1995. Just given from what I can see from the hardware and the specs that I have seen so far, I think that time period is a fairly safe bet. I have actually opened this up when I got it, just to really quickly make sure there wasn't anything catastrophically wrong. You know, there wasn't like a leaking Varda battery, really bad capacitors, or just something that needed like immediate attention. So I have looked in here. I do know a little bit about what's inside, but I haven't totally looked and scanned through everything yet. So overall, I think the design looks nice. It's nothing like super special. It is still, at its heart, kind of just a generic beige box from the 90s. The front panel at least is a little bit interesting and unique. It kind of has this neat thing where it kind of changes thickness kind of part way through. It's got this nice curve. It definitely was an okay looking machine in the 90s. And I think some of the lines up top, which you'll get to see in a little bit, I do think it looks pretty nice, but I don't think it's anything like super wild or interesting. It's not like a PS2, which looks really nice, and some of the Gateway 2000s. You know, there were better looking computers than this. We got this section with these holes here, and these are actually ventilation holes, I think, because I'm pretty sure there is like an intake fan right here. So that is pretty nice, actually. You didn't see a ton of that yet. So a bit of a forward-looking design. It does have an Intel Pentium sticker, so it does have some sort of Pentium processor in it. It does not have a Windows 95 sticker, which I think is interesting, and it kind of gives away the time frame of this machine, is that either this didn't come configured with Windows 95, or this was sold a little before Windows 95 came out. I don't think Microsoft required a Windows sticker for like Windows 3.1, but I'm pretty sure they required a 95 sticker for every machine that was being shipped with 95, so it is kind of an interesting clue we can sort of take a guess at. See, we have that lovely 80s era AT&T logo. The old bell icon, you know, is also pretty iconic, but I think this one looks better. It's kind of odd that they went for this sort of green accent kind of design going on. You'd think they'd choose blue, since that's, you know, the AT&T color. They chose this sort of green, which definitely feels like a 90s choice. Now, the interesting thing that you'll see in a second is that it is an AT-style power supply, at least from the looks of it, but that is not an AT power switch. That is like a standard, more modern soft power switch, which I didn't think ACPI really existed yet. And especially since that's not an ATX power supply, so I don't really know what's going on with this. I don't know if the power supply is proprietary or something, or if they're pulling off some weird thing and they came up with their own custom like soft power solution, but that is just strange. You have power and hard drive activity lights, and this button, which you would think would be a reset button, but as you can see, it has a little key icon next to it, and I have no idea what this is for. I'm guessing maybe this is some sort of like lock switch. Maybe there was some program that would run in the background that when you pressed this switch, it would like, you know, lock the computer or something. And, you know, you'd have to type in a password after you pressed it. Maybe this was a replacement for like the key locks that computers used to have. I don't really know. This is a mystery to me. So if anyone really knows what this is or what this does, and if we can't figure it out, please comment, because I'm very curious about that. And up here, we can definitely get a better view that it's not in perfect cosmetic shape. There's some scuffs. There's a ton of dirt and grime on this computer, but I don't think it's nothing that can't be restored. And it is thankfully not very yellowed, so I don't think it really even needs retrobrighting. But up here for the drives, we can see we have a CD-ROM drive. This looks to be original, or very close to original. It's not a CD burner, just compact disc, and has headphone jack and the volume wheel. So this is definitely a CD-ROM I would expect from, you know, 95 or thereabouts. Don't know the speed, but I'm guessing it's probably around like a 4-speed, maybe 8-speed, but I think 4-speed is probably more likely. And we have a conveniently labeled 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. Considering it labels it as 1.44, I almost wonder if they offered this with a 2.88 meg version, which that would be pretty interesting, but that could have also just been whoever manufactured the floppy drive just decided to do that. So looking here on the back, you can see here's that AT style power supply. And when you look inside at the connectors, they are AT style connectors. So that's adding even more mystery to that whole, you know, I just don't know what's going on with that. See, we have a sticker. It says AT&T Global Information Solutions, assembled in USA. The rest of the parts were probably all made in like Taiwan or maybe Korea or something at around this time period, but at least it was assembled in America, so that's neat. It does have a key lock here. However, I believe this is just a case key lock to lock people from opening the case. I don't think it actually disables keyboard input or anything. I don't have the key for this. I might have one that actually works, but thankfully it's unlocked and I don't really have a need to ever lock it, so I'm probably never going to actually bother to find out. And then looking down here at the I/O, we got some kind of odd things going on here. This might look really strange to you, but I know what they've done here. And this was a thing that a lot of different manufacturers did back then. I'm pretty sure Gateway did it, Compaq might have did it. There was just a lot of manufacturers that did this. What's going on here is that I think this is a desktop motherboard, like a motherboard that was meant to go in a flat desktop case, and it has a riser here. And I have found evidence of a Globalyst 620, which does seem to be a flat desktop computer. So I think what they did was they just made one board for basically two computers, and it makes sense. It saves you money. Sure, you end up with some weirdness here, but really it wasn't all that weird at the time. You have to think the ATX standard was still like a couple years off, so this really wasn't that strange. And you know, if it saved money, it made sense to do, and I don't think anybody really would think that this was all that weird at the time, but definitely to our modern eyes, it definitely does look kind of strange. So for the I/O, we can see we actually have these neat little icons. Like you can see the mouse is like actually a mouse. The serial ports, I'm not sure what those are supposed to be. Printer, so parallel port, and little CRT monitor for VGA. We do have a modem of some sort. Don't know what the speed is, probably like 14.4, maybe 28.8. And we do have a sound card, which is a bit interesting. I don't know if this came configured with a sound card originally, or if that was a user add-on later. And up top, we have these written notes about some instructions on how to use the computer. And this actually gives us the history of what this computer was used for. And that was for a movie theater box office. Not what I would expect an AT&T PC to be used for. And I kind of suspect that that wasn't the original use case for this computer. AT&T definitely doesn't seem like it would have been like a cheap, more affordable brand. So I bet that this was originally used for something else and it got repurposed as a box office computer. And I'm guessing that its box office duties would have been to run some sort of like, you know, just like seat management kind of software, and, you know, kind of to sort of synchronize multiple computers at once. Because if you have multiple people selling tickets at the same time, you can't really count the number of seats and the number of tickets that you've sold very well. So having computers that can sort of automate that to make sure you don't sell too many tickets for one single theater is a pretty good idea. Trust me, you don't want to sell too many tickets for a single theater. Customers are usually not very happy about that. So we can see here it talks about using some sort of software called Box Pro. And this actually looks like it was a piece of DOS software, not necessarily surprising. And we can see here that it actually talks about Windows 98 being on the computer, and it actually tells you to just hit cancel to bypass the password prompt, which is pretty funny. This computer definitely came out a few years before 98 came out, so this was definitely installed later, assuming that's even still on here. I haven't powered this thing up even yet because, well, I want to make sure everything's okay. And just so you guys know, it is Energy Star compliant. Let's get this thing open. Unsurprising, it has sort of like a shell that kind of covers the whole case, but the way it's designed is more like a flat desktop style computer. In fact, when you lay it flat like this, it really does look just like a normal desktop computer, not a tower. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't reuse some of the case tooling manufacturing for this. What I also think is interesting is that they painted some of the screws like these, which I think are quite interesting. And I'm guessing that these are holding in sort of the bracket for the PCI cards. So now this should just slide back like this, and oh no, what's this? Oh no, we've had a casualty. Piece of plastic. I swear that wasn't there when I opened this the first time, or that didn't fall out, so hopefully we're not losing a bunch of plastic in the process of this. Yeah, this really does open just like a desktop computer. And what I think is so cool about this computer is that it really is like almost a perfect time capsule to when it came out. It really doesn't seem like they upgraded a whole lot. Maybe added the sound card, and I know they upgraded the hard drive, which we'll take a look at, but Everything else seems like it was stock and has not been touched, so that's really cool. All right, now that we got some light going on in here, hopefully we can see everything well. I will say the cable management isn't amazing, but it does look like they at least cared a little bit more than some 90s manufacturers. Like this is a nice little like twist, and it does seem like they cared a little bit. Now, the big important thing we need to look into is this power supply, because I kind of have trust issues with AT power supplies. You know, you have one blow up on you and you just kind of, yeah, you start to not trust them very much. So you can see here it's a 250 watt power supply, and it's actually made by a company called Tiger. I did look that up a little bit. Haven't been able to find a whole lot about Tiger. I did see one guy on Vogons who says he has a 250 watt Tiger power supply, and he said seems pretty decent from what I remember. So hopefully this is okay. I am gonna open this up, clean it out, and make sure the capacitors are okay and that there's nothing funny going on before I even think about plugging this in. Because especially if this is a proprietary power supply, like the pinout and stuff is proprietary, that is gonna be a complete nightmare to deal with. Apologies for shaky cam, but as we can see here, the power supply connectors, they do look like standard AT power connectors. They're just not side by side. They're stacked vertically like this. So this might be a stock pinout. I don't know, but yeah, it's just strange. As we can see, we have this mystery purple, gray, and black cable that plugs into a 3-pin connector that looks like a fan connector down here on the motherboard. And that is going into the power supply. So I'm betting that AT&T created their own pseudo soft power solution, and that this cable is effectively shorting the two connectors together to sort of turn the power supply on. Here, let me show you. Here's a random AT power supply I have on the floor. Don't ask why, but you can see here's the normal power switch connectors. So normally these are hooked up to a normal physical like toggle switch or something like that. And that tells the power supply to turn on, because these are basically mains voltage, and that's how it's turning it on. So I'm betting this is some sort of more custom solution. I doubt there's mains voltage here, because that doesn't make any sense, but there must be some little controller inside the power supply that is effectively taking the role of that, because really the rest of this does look like an AT power supply. As we can thankfully see, it does have a standard coin cell CR2032, so thankfully no Varda or Dallas clock chip to deal with. They do have AT&T silkscreened onto the board, so they took some effort with designing this board, and it doesn't seem like necessarily an OEM system that some other company made and that they just stuck their brand name on, but it might be. So I found this later while I was editing the video. Apparently it was OEM'd. Apparently it's an FIC board. FIC? Do people say it as FIC? I've never actually heard anyone say it, but yeah, I have actually heard of them. So yeah, apparently this was actually OEM'd out, which is really not surprising. Apparently it's a PSK 2000. I tried looking for it on the retro web. Didn't seem to have an entry, so I'm just kind of taking this guy's word for it. But I mean, yeah, that looks like the board. Yeah, it doesn't look like AT&T actually made it themselves, which is just really not surprising. You can see here that we actually have a Coast module, cache on a stick. Yeah, it's just a way to upgrade cache. Wow, that is a really wobbly. Not a big fan of that. Not sure how much cache this is. It's probably like 512K or maybe 1 megabyte. These are Samsung chips, and yeah, I can't easily decipher the model name or the size of the chips, so we'll find that out later. Here we have our Pentium CPU, and I don't know if you can actually read that on camera, but this is a socket 5 motherboard. So the predecessor to socket 7, they're similar. I think the physical sockets are the same. The difference between socket 5 and 7 is that 7 introduced the split voltage. So the I/O voltage is almost always, I think, 3.3 volts for socket 7, and then you can adjust the core voltage to wherever you want. On socket 5, those are tied together, and you're kind of limited on what you can upgrade this with. I think Intel was pretty much the only company, aside from AMD, with the K5s that supported socket 5, so definitely not as upgradable as socket 7 was. And as you can see, we have our heatsink that is glued to the CPU. And I have looked up this model number, and this is a Pentium 100 megahertz. And I think socket 5 went up to 120 megahertz. So this is nearly maxed out. I do think Intel released a few overdrive chips for socket 5, so I guess that's also an option, but overdrive chips are generally pretty expensive and hard to get, so probably not worth getting. But I think Pentium 120s are actually fairly affordable, so could upgrade this if we really wanted to. So I did find this website, 1000bit, I guess, that lists some of the basic specs for the 630. I have no idea where the user that uploaded this got the info from, as I can't find a brochure or advertisement or even the manual for this computer anywhere. Maybe I just don't know how to search for it properly on Internet Archive or something, but if anyone has stuff like this, please upload it and preserve it, or just send me the link so I can try to get a better idea of what exactly was available for these machines. So once again, we need to take this info with a grain of salt, but it mentions that the operating systems available for this machine were MS-DOS and Windows for Workgroups. Okay, that makes sense. Windows 95, which I'm guessing they started offering later, since I find it hard to believe that this system was released after the Windows 95 launch, given the hardware that it's using. Windows NT, so that's pretty cool. Doesn't say which version, but most likely it would have been 3.5. Novell, that is, it just says Novell, so I'm guessing that's supposed to be NetWare. SCO Unix, SCO Unix, I don't know how people usually say that. Pretty cool to see that they were still pushing their Unix legacy. And OS2. Don't know the version, but given the time frame, I'm guessing it would have been 3.0 Warp, but still, it apparently had OS2 available for it, so that's really cool. Now, given that our machine doesn't have a network card in it, well, it has a modem, but that's not really for connecting to an office network or anything, it's likely that ours didn't ship with something like NetWare, and most likely it just came with DOS and probably Windows 3.1, but it's still cool to know that it had so many options for operating systems. I've also found a driver page that is apparently hosted by NCR themselves, so that's cool that they're still hosting that. And some of the drivers are for OS2 and NT, so this list is at least partially true. The site also has listings for a Globalyst 720 and 730, so that implies that the 630 wasn't quite the last model they made, but still, it's pretty close to the last. That site also mentions that these had between a 75 and 120 megahertz Pentium, so pretty much the entire socket 5 lineup, and that it had between 8 and 64 megabytes of RAM. It also mentions the original hard drive sizes as being 540, 850, and 1000 megabytes. And you'll notice that there's no fan here on the CPU. You don't generally need a fan for some of these old Pentiums and whatnot, but there is actually a fan right here. It looks like an 80mm fan made by Nidec, and it has a lot of dirt on it. Sucks air in from the front and is blowing over the CPU, which is perfectly adequate for a system like this. A lot of times on these systems you had like the power supply fan and that was it. So it is nice that they did take care to give it somewhat proper cooling. As you can see, we have a VLSI chipset. Don't know anything about it, but VLSI is probably okay. We do have this support beam conveniently in the way of being able to look at the RAM. Let me pop one of these sticks out really quick. Thankfully, these are metal tabs on these 72-pin SIM sockets. Sometimes they use plastic ones, and those are almost guaranteed to snap off, being how old they are now. Although, man, these things are pretty tight. Wow. So you have that same, like, smart name that was on the cache module. So I'm guessing maybe these are original. Looking at the chips, I can't quite figure out what the capacity is. Don't know if in this model number, maybe 32? Maybe these are 32 megabyte modules, which would be pretty wild. Yeah, there's 2 of these. There's 4 chips on each module. Yeah, I guess we'll find out when we turn the system on. Now looking at the cards here, we have this very strange card. You know, this thing looks incredibly simplistic. That just looks like a ROM chip to me with some logic chips to kind of, you know, send it out to the ISA bus. So let's pop this thing out really quick. It says copyright 1998 Micro Firmware Inc. with portions copyright Phoenix Technologies Limited. Now, I'm not entirely sure what this card is. Could be some weird BIOS extension or something, but what I think this is for, and now that I'm seeing this on the back, which I had not seen before, I have not taken this out, as you can probably tell from the copious amount of dust on the back bracket, but I think this is a Y2K patch card. I've seen these before, but I've never actually seen one that was installed in a computer. So obviously Y2K, there were computers that didn't really support the year 2000 properly, and I'm actually shocked that this is in here because a system from 1995 that doesn't support Y2K seems incredibly strange. So I almost wonder if this was put in here just as like a safety thing, and that they were kind of paranoid that, ooh, maybe it doesn't actually support Y2K or something. But yeah, that is just really, really strange that they would need this. But maybe this is like a weird exception and this computer doesn't actually support Y2K. And as we can see, they are quite proud of their home state of Oklahoma, whoever Micro Firmware is. So yeah, pretty interesting. I've never seen one of these, but yeah, I guarantee that's what that is. What else would the Flash 2000 be in a card this simple? I know that you all want to see the sound card and whatnot, which, I mean, you already can, but we're going to save the best stuff for last. And it's an interesting way to hold in the card, but that's what they did. Take a look at this modem we got going on here, because I definitely needed another ISA modem. So this is a US Robotics modem, as we can see from here on the back. Can I figure out what speed this is? This is copyright 1995, so this is seeming like it's more from 95. Oh, interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. Hold on. Now, if you look at the manufacture date here, that's the 24th week of 96. Now, I'm not too sure, but I don't think they would have been making computers into 96. Interesting. Maybe this was upgraded. Maybe this is a faster modem than was originally in here. I will say, if the machine didn't originally ship with a modem, I do think that's pretty funny, given that it is the AT&T computer. You know, be kind of funny if you couldn't actually hook it up to a phone network by default. But so, the mystery grows deeper. Was this original, or was this an add-on? And if you're wondering, here on the back side, there's only 3 ISA slots. There is not PCI slots on this side. They were definitely still prioritizing ISA for connectivity, which makes sense. A lot of expansion cards were, but thankfully there are 3 PCI slots down there, so we're not totally out of luck. Here we have a Vibra 16 from Creative. Now, when I saw this, I was pretty worried that this was going to be one of the terrible, awful CQM Vibra 16s. Seriously, they're up there with Crystal as being like pretty bad OPL emulation, but thankfully this doesn't have CQM, and this has a real genuine YMF 262 from Yamaha. So genuine OPL3 sound. Don't know if the filtering is any decent, because that plays a huge role in FM sound quality. But yeah, this sound card should actually be pretty decent. It is the CT2260, so that is a huge relief that we actually have a decent sound card. What the heck just fell off of it? It's a little plastic piece fell off of it, and I think that's the top of a jumper that broke off or something. Yeah, hopefully this is pretty decent. We do have a wavetable header, very nice. Don't know if this has the hanging note bug that plagued Sound Blaster 16s. I don't know if they fixed that with the Vibra 16s, but maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And I thought I saw on here somewhere a manufacture date. Here we can see the board was manufactured 4th week of 95. So maybe this card is original to the computer. And OPL chip, 1st week of 95. Vibra 16th chip, 12th week of 95. So yeah, this is definitely a 1995 built card. So that's pretty neat. And zooming in down here, you can see we have a built-in S3 Trio 64 graphics chip. The Trio 64s are pretty decent 2D graphics chips. So I think this will be pretty good for playing games. I think it has pretty decent Windows acceleration too. So yeah, we're set, especially since it seems like the VRAM has been upgraded. Whether or not it came like this from the factory or not, I don't know. But yeah, that's really cool. I've actually, I think these have been upgraded by whoever used this, because on board there's Hyundai RAM chips and these are Samsung chips. So I think this has been upgraded by somebody. Don't know the size, but if I had to guess, it was probably 1 megabyte on board, and this is an extra megabyte. So this is probably at least 2 megabytes of VRAM. For a 2D graphics chip, that is pretty good. We can probably get some pretty decent resolution and color depth out of that, at least like 1024 by 768, 32-bit color or 24-bit color. I'm not actually finding a date code on the motherboard anywhere. I've been looking, and I am just not really seeing a whole lot. Everything is very nicely labeled. I will say this board looks like it was very nicely laid out. Like, check out this heatsink on this voltage regulator. Like, that is a pretty nice heatsink. You definitely don't see a lot of companies putting that much effort into a voltage regulator, unless this thing just runs really hot and it actually needs it. So now the hard drive, which is definitely the one thing I know for sure that was upgraded. This is a Western Digital 4.3 gigabyte hard drive, which is definitely would be a little on the, I think, too big side for 1995. And if we look at the manufacture date, don't know if you can actually read it or not, but it says August of 1998. So this thing was definitely upgraded. This probably got upgraded at the same time they put Windows 98 on it. So pretty interesting. I really like computers that are like this, that are like time capsules, because you can like piece together its history and like when it was made and like what upgrades have been done to it, when they were done. That's just one thing I really love about finding systems that are mostly untouched like this, and that haven't been messed with by people more recently. And one more thing before I pull out the power supply to test it. See here, the BIOS chip is a Phoenix BIOS, which is interesting. Phoenix was more popular in the 90s, but yeah, I think American Megatrends was still beating them pretty hard in terms of market share. So yeah, seeing a Phoenix BIOS is always nice. I think Toshiba used Phoenix for a very, very long time. We can actually see these model numbers here, which I think are the equivalent NCR model numbers for this computer. So I took a little bit of a break, but I think it's time we crack into this power supply and make sure there's no funny business going on. And during that time, it got really windy outside, so hopefully you're fine with the ambient sounds of my garage door and water heater exhaust rattling. Actually, I'm not even sure if you can really hear those on my lav mic, but if I use the camera microphone, you'd definitely be able to hear it. And I'm gonna take a picture of the AT connectors, just so I have an idea of how they plug back in. Oh, this is really neat. I just realized in here, they actually have the pinout voltages listed for the connectors. That's really nice, actually. So that'll make figuring out if it's proprietary or not a lot easier if I so need to replace it. Worth noting is that the proprietary cable is not labeled in any way on the board, so who knows for sure on that. Oh, they even twist-tied the extra cables to the case. So yeah, they actually did care about cable management. I didn't notice that before. Huh, they put extra screws on the power supply inside. I don't know why you would do that. It doesn't need it, but they did, I guess. So if someone took the screws out from the back, it would still be mounted? That just seems like a really odd thing to do. Like, I think pretty much everyone agreed that the 4 screws on the back of the power supply was enough. All right. Get this on out of here. So I expect this is going to be pretty dusty and dirty on the inside, but that's all the more reason to open it up. And especially check for capacitors. It appears that only 2 screws for the top cover? Can't be right. But I do see a date stamped on it, 21st week of 95, so yeah, it's looking more and more like this computer was made probably... Oh, interesting. This says 25th week of 95. So I guess these were stamped at different times. That, or that's not a date code. Considering everything else has been 95, I would think that that's what it would be. How do you get this off? Do I just need to pry it off? I guess you just pry it off? Okay. Well, the good news is that I'm not seeing any problems. Wow, that wind is really going. I'm not seeing any problems. The capacitors look okay. You know, I'm not seeing any leakage or any funny business going on. These are Rubicon caps. The big ones are. So they did use decent quality caps. Can't tell what the smaller ones are. I think those are also Rubicon, or maybe Nichicon. So that's pretty good. Okay, so yeah, this thing definitely doesn't look like it's a cheap, you know, kind of slapped together thing. This does look like it was pretty well built. And it's not like heavy or anything, because this was back when you could actually measure power supply quality by its weight, but this actually, it's okay. But yeah, that's actually pretty good. It has a fuse. The fan's not seized up or anything. It is very dusty. I'm gonna get a brush and try to brush a lot of this dust out. This should be mostly safe to touch. I doubt this thing's been plugged in years, but I am still going to take caution, as you should, anytime you open up a power supply like this. I'm not seeing anything like wedged under the board either, so that's good. This dust is looking fairly thick, so I don't think just blowing it out with like the vacuum is going to be a great idea. Again, apologies for the wind noise. I did not expect it to get windy out of nowhere like that. There's a few cobwebs in here. And then I'm gonna, after I get this cleaned out and put the cover back on, I'm gonna plug it in without plugging it into the board. I'm gonna plug it in, and I'm gonna see if any voltage comes out of it. If it does just turn on without the motherboard thing, and I can check the voltages, I'll definitely make sure that they're the correct voltages coming out of there. It's not like extremely dusty in here, which is good, but it's kind of that like thick, not quite sticky dust. Like, it's not like a smoker's dust, but it's just annoying. Yeah, so I've never heard of Tiger. Don't know. Oh, whoa. Wow, some dust went like right in my nostril. Oh, that was... I should probably be wearing a mask for this, honestly. This fan is definitely dusty. Probably should take this fan out to actually clean it, which probably would be a good idea. And I think I just realized that the fuse that's in here is actually for the external monitor connector and not for the inlet. But I'm sure there's a fuse somewhere else on the board or something that acts as a fuse. So, I mean, if they cared enough to fuse the output, I'm sure there's a fuse somewhere on the input. The 12 volt, 15 or 0.15 amp fan, not a 15 amp fan. That would be extremely high power. It would actually shatter the plastic in like an instant. Yep, that's a lot of dust. That's a lot of dust. Yeah, it's a good thing we're getting that out, though. Good enough. There is dust everywhere on the table now. For a second, I thought one of the caps said USSR, and I was getting very confused, but no, it just says USR. We can put this back on and plug her in, and I don't think it'll blow up. That's good. So hopefully it's still outputting the correct voltages. Let's plug this thing in. All right, here we go. Well, the lights flickered when I did that, but the fan is not spinning. So I'm guessing that it is not outputting anything without being turned on, which makes sense. Okay, well, the fact that it's not, you know, it's not blowing up is a, you know, a good sign. So I'm gonna say I don't normally like plugging power supplies into things without knowing the voltages they're outputting, but it looks okay. It's probably within spec enough that it's safe to plug it in, and I'll see. You know, not every AT power supply was like atrociously made, and you know, stuff like that. Also, I need to fix that alignment. Something interesting I just noticed, this has an extra connector on it, which is different. It is not the same. This is P3, whatever that would go for. I don't know if it's like the extra power thing that would have been on, like, you know, Pentium 4 era power supplies or whatnot. It's definitely odd. I've never seen an AT power supply that had 3 of those connectors, but I'm even noticing that the plastic thing here that has the fan and these card supports even has AT&T printed on it. So I'm actually thinking less and less that this is an OEM system that they rebranded. I think they actually did develop this from the ground up themselves, which is very impressive. Considering that I doubt that they were a very large operation by this point, it is nice to see that they took the time and care to actually, you know, make their own stuff. Although it is very confusing because the board is labeled P8 and P9 and these are P1 and P2. So that's not the most convenient way to number these that you could. Just double checking my photo reference. Yep, that's back in. Plug in the, I guess, sense wires. This is nice that the board has 2 IDE channels. Oh, interesting. On the board, it actually lists the hard drive IDE connector as being a PCI IDE controller, and the one going to the CD-ROM is labeled as an ISA controller. So I guess this has 2 controller chips for it. I'm not going to put the sound card or the other cards back in for now because we don't need any of that. I do have all the power cables plugged back in though. Now before we get to testing out the computer, I figured we should look at the keyboard and mouse really quick. I'm not going to do anything to the mouse right now. I'll just plug in a different PS2 mouse. This is a very basic 2-button mouse. It is made by Logitech, which is very nice, and I don't think this thing will have a problem working. Wow, that is a really cheap feeling mouse ball. That thing has like no weight to it. So yeah, that kind of sucks. Depending on how well this thing works, I might swap in a heavier ball. Maybe it's designed to work well with the lighter ball, but yeah, I don't know. Also, the cable has some unfortunate damage to it that I saw somewhere. Yeah, it's right here. I don't know if that'll stop it from working. It doesn't look like it ripped into any of the wires. It just kind of tore the shielding. But yeah, this thing is extremely dirty too. Like, look how clean that is versus that. And now the keyboard, which I'm actually the most interested in and excited for. Now, the reason I'm so excited for the keyboard is that I think it's actually mechanical. Not that I can really tell because it has this awful, just really awful rubber like safety mat things on it. Oh, this feels so bad. Ooh, oh, that's gross. Just to type on. I can't imagine doing that. Now, as much as I hate this rubber thing on here, it probably actually saved the keyboard from like decades worth of dust and grime getting in the key switches. So I do have to be thankful for that at least. Now, I'm pretty sure these are mechanical. Just the way it feels under the terrible rubber. It feels like there's a tactile switch in there, and it's not a mushy rubber dome bottom. If I had to guess, it's probably Alps, because I think AT&T did use Alps. But we're just gonna rip this garbage off of here. This is a custom-made rubber thing too, unless this is some generic one you could get that would work on almost any keyboard, but this looks custom made to me, so maybe this is an official AT&T accessory. Not that we're losing much. This thing definitely deserves to be off of here. I'm actually surprised the rubber isn't just ripping off. It's actually like coming off very nicely. Oh. Yeah, this thing has been on there I think since day one. That is dang near brand new looking. and I'm gonna get some close-up shots of this to show you, but wow, that looks amazing. Seriously, this looks like I just opened it. So yeah, that rubber thing had to have been on there from like day one. I wonder if that was like an included accessory with the computer. Now for the big moment. It's hard to say. It could be dome with slider. I've never actually felt of the later Alps key switches. I felt Tall Cream, says I have a TI-99 4A that has them. And those are very different feeling than this, but yeah, those could be rubber domes. Let's see. That doesn't look like Alps to me. Well, dang it. Yeah, no, that, let's make sure they didn't like cheap out and use different keys for that. Yeah, no, that is some sort of dome with slider. Okay, so yeah, there is a mushy kind of bottom out now that the rubber's off of it. So that is unfortunate. I was really hoping this was going to be like an Alps keyboard, but I'm going to be honest, it actually doesn't feel that bad. And really, I don't think that dome with sliders actually feel that bad if they're done right. If I wasn't on such a hollow plastic table, this would actually feel pretty nice, I think. It's not quite the mechanical dream I was hoping for, but it does feel pretty nice. Although, unfortunately, the rubber, interestingly, only this one is turning to goo. The little rubber pad here. This one is still kind of okay. The top two are not really sticky at all. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That one's going to goo and it's leaving residue everywhere, so that's fun. Well, I think it's time we go test out the system. Okay, so I just kind of quickly set it up here on my like new computer kind of test station that I kind of made. It's just one of those old CRT carts that has a monitor attached to it. This is my first time actually really using it for a purpose like this, so I'm kind of happy I got to use it finally. All I have is the power VGA and just this random Dell keyboard plugged into it. That's it. None of the expansion cards or anything. Everything should be good to go, so I think we're ready to test it. So I'm gonna go hit the power on the power strip. Here we go. Ooh. All right, good. Ooh, that's a noisy hard drive. Haha, yes! Oh, it works. Oh, yes. Okay, it's got 16 megs of RAM. CMOS is bad, that's what I expected. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off. I'm gonna grab my multimeter so I can check the voltages really quick, so we don't accidentally kill anything. 11.9 volts on the 12 volt rail. Tiny bit low, it could be a little higher, but that's okay. 5.17 on the 5 volt. A tad high, but it's not the worst. So 5 volt and 12 volt are good. You know, 5 volt's a little high, but I've seen that on a lot of old power supplies like this. So I'm not totally surprised by that. Oh. It was trying to configure stuff that whole time. There's 3.3 volts. I could try to poke at really quick. Okay, so there's some test pads on the riser that say they're 3 volt, and there are ground pads there, and I've tried probing there, and I only get 0.11 volts out of my meter for that. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe the 3 volts line in the power supply is dead? I don't know. Or maybe that's just a weird thing with the riser. I don't know if I really have any other place to conveniently check for 3.3 volts. Well, if the 3.3 volts doesn't work, I guess we'd find out on the cards. Because in theory, the cards wouldn't work. Okay, interesting. The pads for the AT connectors don't actually say that there's a 3 volt connection on there anywhere. And now that I think about it, I do think AT power supplies were only +12, -12, +5, and -5, and then the rest were ground. if I'm correct on that. And that's all that the pinout says. So maybe it doesn't generate 3 volts for the riser unless there's a card plugged in. That could be what that's for, or maybe those are just unused test pads. You don't actually need them. I know PCI and ISA, I think, were both 5 volts initially. So this might just not support 3.3 volt PCI, and they were planning to, but they just didn't. So I don't know. There are some capacitors on the board, the riser board, but they don't look blown to me. So yeah, I guess we'll find out once I plug the cards in, but that'll be later. But if anyone knows about that, please let me know. But the thing works. It actually works, and it works fine. The voltages on the, supply are okay. Let me, I'll double check 5 volt and 12 volt again really quick, just to make sure it's not like rising. Nope, 5 volts the same. 5 volt and 12 volt are rock steady where they were before. So yeah, I think that power supply is okay then. Let's go into the setup here. Warning, CMOS checksum is invalid. Default values will be loaded. To be expected. The date defaults to 1988. So we have 16 megabytes of RAM, which is decent for the time period. It's not anything incredibly crazy, but it's not like super low end. Pretty standard BIOS settings. Monitor settings applies to onboard video only. That's really cool, actually. I've never seen that before. You can set the refresh rate and resolutions per thing. Wonder how high it lets you go. You can go up to 90 hertz interlaced. Feature connector. Don't need that. DRAM parity. Plug and play OS. Not set up. Security. There's no password set. That's good. Well, it probably would have got reset with the battery dying anyways. CPU power management. So you can kind of control the CPU speed, I guess. I guess you'd get a little bit of power efficiency. Advanced power management allows APM-aware software to have better power management settings. Well, I still need to replace the battery in there, but it works. It doesn't say how much VRAM the video card has. Okay, so we only have 256K of cache. That's interesting. Ooh, that's a nice and loud PC speaker. Now, let's see if this thing boots up into Windows 98 like the thing said. Operating system not found. Okay, so I wonder if it was wiped or maybe the hard drive is just dead. The bearings on that drive are pretty whiny, so maybe this thing is dead. Kind of interested what'll happen if I press the key lock thing, or the key button. It doesn't seem to do anything, so that's something. And real quick, I'm not even gonna attempt to put a disc in this because this is really dusty, but I'm kind of curious if the CD-ROM opens. It does, and it wasn't really grindy sounding. Yeah, a little bit of lubrication. I think that'll actually be okay, assuming the laser and stuff works. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. This is gonna be great. This is gonna be it for part 1. I'm trying to rush through this because my camera battery's about to die and I don't wanna take a break for that. So this is gonna be really cool. In the second part, we're gonna clean all this up, get it really nice, try to restore it. Maybe a third part we'll do software or something. And I'm doing this in parts because I don't really have enough time to do all of this in one go. And that would be an insanely long video. Besides, I'm just not gonna be free to do a video until like after the new year. So this part is gonna be the first part, probably the last video of the year. And then after the new year is going to be the rest of the parts. So this is going to be great. I hope you guys stick around for the next parts. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Oh, so it is just like a soft power thing. Why wouldn't you just use the hard power? Why make it complicated?